Hi everyone, I'm Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to create 3 cards using the same color palette. This is going to really simplify my process and is going to make this process a lot more enjoyable because there's going to be less thinking involved when it comes to the color choices. This video is also a part of the Creative Wonderland video hop with Altenew celebrating their latest release. I'm going to have a link to the next person in the video hop link down below in the video description, along with the information about all the prizes that you can win. So be sure to leave a comment down below in the description and or over on the Altenew channel as well. So first I want to take a look at some of the products I received from Altenew. This is the Spark Joy Ornamental Bouquet. So it's a stencil and a hot foil plate. Then we have the Build-A-Garden. So I have the stamp, the coordinating die, and also a coordinating stencil for that. Then I have the Majestic Mountains, which I love how realistic that Altenew makes some of these stencils. The first thing that I'm going to do is some hot foiling. So I have my Spellbinders Glimmer System here. I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to let that warm up. So I will just set my system off on the side while it's heating up and I'm going to get my foil ready. So this is the Ornamental Bouquet and I have a piece of hammermill cardstock that's cut to 5.5 by 8.5. I'm going to be using the Altenew Glimmer Foil, not to be confused with any type of toner foil. You will need glimmer foil in order to do this. So I'm just kind of eyeballing a size that's going to fit this glimmer plate, and I'm going to place it down onto my cardstock with the pretty side up. Once I have that straightened out, I'm going to take my hot foil plate and place it over the top so the design is facing down. Then I'm going to trim off any of the excess foil. Now, my personal preference when I'm hot foiling is to tape my foil plate down to the cardstock. So I just make sure that the tape is touching the plate, the foil, and the cardstock. Now, while I have some time yet, while my system's warming up, I'm also going to get some foil ready for the Essential Sentiments hot foil plate. This is something that has been previously released, and I just thought since I'm hot foiling, I might as well go ahead and use these sentiments too and foil it right away. I'm going to use the same process where I'm going to kind of eyeball how much foil I need, trim off the excess, and then the same process as before as I have the pretty side of the foil facing up. I'm going to have my hot foil plate so it is the sentiments facing down, and then I'm going to attach that to the cardstock. Now that my system is warmed up, and I know that because the green light is on, I'm going to take this first set, this is the Ornamental Bouquet, and I'm going to flip it over so that the hot foil plate is touching the system. Then I'm going to hit my timer button. It's going to blink green until it's ready. While I'm waiting, I'm going to take my plate and my shim and place it over the top. Now, once that light turns a solid green, that means it's ready. So I'm going to disengage it from the machine and I'm going to run it through my Platinum 6 die cut machine. Now, as I bring this back to my work surface, that hot foil plate is going to be quite warm. So you are going to need to be a little careful when you're removing it. I just removed that tape, I peeled back the plate, and then I can remove my foil, and it foiled absolutely perfect. And I believe, if I didn't say it before, this is the brass hot foil from Altenew. So I'm going to repeat those same steps with my sentiment. I'm going to take that sheet, flip it over so that the hot foil plate is touching that system, warm it up, and then I can run it through my die cut machine. And the sentiments foiled perfectly as well. These sentiments also have a coordinating die that's going to die cut them all out at once. I apologize I don't have that on screen, but I did do it off screen. So I have a bunch of sentiments ready to go. And here's a look at all of those sentiments die cut out. I'm just kind of going to scrape my fingernail across the edges because sometimes there's little hairs, paper hairs that get stuck there. So I'll just kind of clean those up and set them off on the side. Now I'm going to work on ink blending my Ornamental Bouquet. So I put a little bit of Post-it tape behind my panel to secure it to the work surface. You could also use your sticky mat for this from the stamp wheel, but I'm just going to have mine on the work surface for now. Now our first layer of the stencil, there is a divided line there. So we have a flower on one side and then we have some more flowers on the other. The colors that I'm going to be using today is Pink Crystal, Mauve, Berrylicious, and I have no idea how to pronounce the last one, like Acacia Berry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's the darkest color out of that selection. So I'm starting with the most open area of the stencil on that large flower, and I'm going to ink blend on, I believe this one, I actually jumped ahead to Mauve. I skipped Pink Crystal, which was the lightest color. After I blended that on, I shifted my stencil. I'm going to hold my stencil down to my work surface with some Post-it tape. And now I'm going to bring in this next color selection, which this first color is Misty Moor. Now, on screen at first, it's going to look almost like a green. But as we start adding our colors to this, it's going to take on almost a dusty yellow type of shade. To me, it's a very unique color. So that was layer 1. Now I'm going to bring in layer 2, and they are all labeled in the top corner what layer they are. Again, there's a divided line for the 2 separate flowers that we have here. Now this second color that I'm adding, this is the Berrylicious. So this is the third darkest color out of that set. I shifted my stencil, lined up the next layer for the other flowers, and this one is going to be Marshland. I am using a mini ink blending tool, which is also helping me kind of control the color so I'm not getting it all over the place because it is a smaller blending brush. I can remove the second layer and bring in the third layer of the stencil. Again, it is divided. So I'm going to line that up, and these really are easy to line up. I love how Altenew is making these just really easy to work with. And this is that darkest shade that I added for that first flower. And then I came in with Sea Forest for the last set of flowers that we have here. Now the next layer of the stencil is going to be coloring in the leaves, and this one also kind of has a 2-part to it. We're going to start down here with these larger leaves for that first floral image. And oh my gosh, again, pronunciation of these colors, Maca tea. I am so sorry, you guys. I obviously don't get out enough because I don't know how to pronounce these, but I am going to have them all linked down below in the video description. Now, some of these areas of the stencil, I don't even really need to hold it down with my Post-it tape very much. I can just shift it, hold it down with my hand, and add that color in. Now for the last layer of the stencil, we're going to add some more details to our leaves. Now this first layer here is going to be that larger flower, the leaves for the larger flower. I got this one, guys. I can pronounce this. This is Swamp Green. So I'm going to just go ahead and add that to the rest of my leaves. So it's going to give a beautiful contrast to this. And you're going to notice as I pull away my stencil that those other flowers where I used kind of that dusty yellow, they really take on that yellow color now that I have the green in there. So I'm going to put this one off on the side, and I'm going to use that same color palette for the rest of my projects. I'm going to be starting next with the, this one is the Build-A-Garden set. So this has a stamp and a stencil to it. Now the stencil I found very interesting because it has that dotted detail, and there's also this layer where you could mask off your image. So if you wanted to maybe create a 1-layer card, you have that option. And then we have a few layers to color in the flower. Now you could use the stencil to make the flowers all one color, just in maybe different shades, but I'm going to change mine up a little bit, and I call it modernizing it. So first, before I do that, I need to stamp my image. We have the stamp wheel here, and this is the new grid that they have. The last one had circles and diagonals, I think, on it. This one has more of those straight grid lines, which I really love. These are more helpful to me. Plus, on the bottom of the plate, there is a hole that's punched out already, so I don't have to add any stickers to it. I just always make sure that that hole is down in that bottom center. So I went ahead and placed my stamp onto my cardstock. I conditioned it by just rubbing my hand over it or wiping it with my stamp chamois. And I'm going to stamp it in a light colored ink. Normally when I do something like this, I use a light gray, but I decided to change it up a little bit and use the colors I had on my desk. So this one is the Misty Moore color. So I flip the plate over and I'm going to stamp that down. Now, when I pull the plate up, I noticed that I had missed a spot up towards the top of the flower. So I just placed my plate back down, lining it up in the corners, giving that a little bit of extra pressure. Now, it is a brand new stamp, so I was not expecting it to stamp perfectly the first time. So I flipped the plate. I'm going to ink it up one more time with the Misty Moore ink and stamp this down. When I am done with this, I am not going to remove my stamp. This is one of the things I like to do with stamped images and layering stencils is I stamp in a light colored ink, leave my stamp image in place so that if I want to come back and stamp it in a black outline, I have that option. Now I can start ink blending with my stencil. So this stencil has a separated line in there. So there's A1 and A2. They are labeled very clearly so you can see which area of the stencil you need. So I'm starting with A1. I'm going to line that up over those images, and I'm going to bring in the lightest color out of that set that I used earlier. So this one I believe is Pink Crystal, and I'm using my mini blending brush again to add that color. Once I remove it, I'll be honest, I wasn't quite sure how I was feeling about it. Now I'm going to keep going with it. I move the stencil up for A2. And I'm going to bring in the next color in that color selection, which is mauve. So you could do all of these petals really the same color, maybe just adding some darker areas towards the center. But I call it kind of a modernized twist because I'm going to make each petal a different shade. So right there, I definitely was not feeling it, but I had already stamped it. I was already in the middle. I'm halfway through, so I'm going to keep pushing through to see how these colors play out. This is that third color in the set, which is Berrylicious. This is quite a bit darker, and then I can just shift this stencil up to the next area, and I'm going to add that darkest shade. And this color is pretty intense, so I am going to try and just give a little bit lighter pressure towards the ends of the petals, keeping the darkest color towards the centers. Then we have one more layer for the flower itself, and that is going to be to add some centers. I believe I used Sunkissed for this one, so it's just a nice bright yellow that it's going to pop from the center of those dark flowers. And then the last layer is going to be the stem. Now the stem only has one layer to it. So what I'm going to do is take the green and I'm going to have it kind of heavier handed on the right hand side of the stem and be a little bit softer as I get towards the other edge. So that's going to kind of create that little bit of dimension like the rest of my flower kind of has. Now I'm going to bring this back over to my stamp wheel and I'm going to place it in the exact same position that I had it, which is starting in that bottom left-hand corner. And I'm going to ink up my image now with black ink. So I could leave it just like this, kind of gives it almost a no line look, but I decided to bring in the black and just have everything pop out a little bit more. So I'm going to flip the plate over and apply some nice pressure to stamp that down. I'm going to take a good look at it, see if I need to restamp it. I decided I did want to restamp it a little bit. There were some areas that just weren't quite as dark as I had wanted them to be. So I'm going to ink it up one more time. And then after I have that stamped down, I'm going to be taking the coordinating die for it. I mean, it would be beautiful just like this, honestly. But I do love a good coordinating die, so I'm going to die cut it out. I also die cut out another one out of plain white cardstock. And I'm going to just put some liquid glue on the back of that and layer that together to add some stability and dimension to my flower. So while I still had my ink and my stencils out, I'm going to create a background for this one. I'm going to put them all together towards the end, but I'm going to go ahead and do the background for this. I'm using those polka dots that's in that strip, and I'm going to add it to just one side of my card. So again, I have my cardstock kind of attached down with some rolled up Post-it tape. I also use that tape for the top and bottom and then masked off that edge so I can keep that nice and white off on that side. And then I'm using that black ink again it's going to be just really nice dark ink, but I also have to be careful when I'm removing the stencil because I know I went really heavy-handed and I don't want to smear this. So I carefully remove that and I'm going to set this off on the side to dry. So while that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on the Majestic Mountains. And this has some beautiful examples in here. I love that green mountain, but I really wanted to stick to the same color palette. So we're going to do some pink mountains. I know it sounds pretty crazy, but it's going to look really cool. So I'm starting with the first layer of the stencil. I have my cardstock cut to 6 by 6 and I'm just holding everything down with that Post-it tape. Now, because this is such a large open area, I am using a large blending brush to add color. And this is that lightest color out of that pink set that I have. So I believe this was Pink Crystal. Now I'm bringing in layer 2 to add the detail. And this is that mauve, so the second shade in that set. Again, using that large blending brush, it's just going to help me apply ink a lot more quickly than with a smaller blending brush. And then after this layer is done, I can bring in layer 3 so you can see how it is building up that dimension of the mountain. Line up stencil 3, hold that down. Now I did start out with a large blending brush for this, but I end up switching to a smaller one. And the reason for that is because when I'm using a smaller blending brush, I can get a lot more intensity and it's just a lot easier to kind of work those fine details because there are some pretty small areas on this stencil. So that was still using that third color out of that ink selection. And I think that one is Berrylicious. Now the last layer of the stencil, again, is the one I can't pronounce, but it's the darkest color out of that set. And again, I'm using that small blending brush to apply that color. So whenever people ask me, do you really need all these different sizes of blending brushes? I personally say yes. I think they all serve a purpose depending on what you're doing. Now I'm going to go ahead and create some card bases. I like to use side folding card bases. So I am scoring these at 4 1/4. So it's going to be an A2 size side folding card base. And I made 3 of them, just reinforcing that fold with my bone folder. Whenever I'm going to attach something to the front of a card base, I like to hold my card base shut with some rolled up Post-it tape. I'm taking my tape runner and I'm going to add that to the entire front of my card base. And now this is the one with the Build a Garden. So I added my polka dotted panel to the front, and then I'm adding liquid glue to the back of my floral piece and adding that to the front of the cardstock. So the edge of my stem is lining up right with the edge of my card front. I'm going to place something heavy on that for a minute and work on my sentiment. This is one of those foiled sentiments. I did trim it down just a little bit, and then I added some foam squares to that and placed it so it's overlapping my flowers. So I'm going to call this one good. I love those dark black polka dots in the background. I think they just offer something unique to the card. Now for my other foiled image, I am going to die cut that out with the Ornate Nesting Die. I don't typically use a die like this, but I thought it worked really well with this design. I also die cut another one out of white cardstock and layered it together with my tape runner. And then I can add this to the front of my A2 size side folding card base. Again, I have my sentiment that I trimmed down, added some foam squares to, and placing that on the front of the card. And then for my last card, which is going to be the mountains, I am going to be using a rectangle die to die cut out my panel. And I used a rectangle die to also create a frame. So this is going to frame my design, kind of rein that background in just a little bit. And I lined it with some foam tape. Now I had trimmed it out just kind of slightly off. I wanted to leave a little bit more room to the top than originally planned. So I had to kind of place my frame up a little bit so it's hanging off the top. And then I just trimmed off the excess at the bottom. Again, I'm adding tape runner to my card base, and then I can place my panel over the top. So you can see I have my peak there and a little bit of open sky towards the top. I think that just kind of was a little bit better than cutting off my mountain at the top. Once again, adding my sentiment, that just putting foam squares on the back. So this went really quick when I limited myself to one color palette, and also was just really nice to experiment because I obviously would never had made pink mountains before. So I think this is something really fun to give a try. All of my supplies are going to be listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. And this is also a part of a video hop, so I will have the next person in line linked below as well, along with the information about the giveaway. So be sure to check that out. Leave some comments along the way to be entered into that giveaway. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for stopping by.